Hello, my name's Dale Adams of Planning Ahead of Time, and today I'm speaking with Claire. Claire, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Claire, and I am a certified end-of-life planning facilitator, and I've recently undertaken the duties of a lasting power of attorney.
And that's really what we're going to speak about today, isn't it? So that we can give the other side. I had a conversation with Jay Palmer recently where we spoke about LPAs and their importance, but I think it's also equally important for people to know what they are undertaking when they agree to do this for somebody, because you obviously have an awareness of what this is all about. You and I train together to be end-of-life facilitators, so we know each other through our end-of-life service work. And yet I feel from what I know, this was much bigger task than you originally expected.
Yeah, that's right. The situation was, it was a friend's sister who I was one of the lasting powers of attorney for. And the two of us, the two attorneys, shared the role, but I took the lead on property and financial affairs, and they took the lead on health and welfare.
So you were basically serving jointly and severably on both documents, but
Yeah.
different leads on different ones. Okay,
Yes.
you were dealing with the financials, and I am aware that during that time, there was actually a property sold, wasn't that? Sorry, a property purchased, I should say.
Yes, that's correct. The person that I was attorney for, that referred to as the donor, as we know, was wishing to downsize from a sort of a cottage to a flat in a purpose-built environment with support. And so part of that role in being involved with the property aspect of this was to work with the appointed solicitor to drive the thing through for the donor.
I bet that wasn't what you expected to be doing when you first had your name put on that document.
No, that was it didn't come as a huge surprise, but because I guess the fact that very early into the attorney's role, probably a couple of months, it became clear that the donor did need to have more user-friendly accommodation. And so we started the process way back in August, probably. And it took such a long time that it was completed sort of just before Christmas.
Okay. So how long before the donor lost capacity were you on the document?
May last year.
Okay. So you took the role on in May, or signed in May, and then by August she was losing capacity?
Well, there was an ongoing condition in which was progressive. And so that was why in October 2022, the whole kind of family had, been discussing and talking with the potential donor about what needed to be done. And as we know, when somebody actually completes all the forms and things like this, it takes quite some time before those forms are lodged with the Office of the Public Guardian.
It really does take so long to get everything in order. But then I don't think people realise, including us, what it actually takes after, for you, they've lost capacity. And well, for me too, as you know, with my mum, there was the loss of capacity, and then actually when she died and everything that's come thereafter. However, we are specifically talking about LPAs. So from the August, obviously, you were working with solicitors over property, which means you have to have full visibility of everything financial, don't you?
Yeah, that's right. And luckily, when myself and the other attorney had visited the donor in the summer, in August of 2023, one of the things that I did was to actually bring all the paperwork of the person together and sort it and present them with a clear overview of where things were at for them in property and in their property and financial affairs, because the condition that had been diagnosed was already progressive, if you will, at that stage. So whilst the donor as such had not lost capacity in terms of not understanding or anything, they still understood what was going on, but needed the help and support in both aspects of the lasting power of attorney to help them, basically.
Well, there is quite a significant difference between ability and capacity. And I'm finding that with a client I'm working with at the moment, who's LPA for 3 family members, and one of which is in a home. Her dad is in a home, and yet he has capacity. He doesn't have ability, but he has capacity. So she's his attorney, and at the moment, she's on the LPA, but hasn't been enacted because he still has the ability to make those decisions. Whereas another family member, she's now been the attorney and acting attorney for 9 years. It's Alzheimer's. The person lost capacity 9 years ago, but although they have obviously Alzheimer's, can continue to live significantly because it was early onset. So they were very young when they were diagnosed, and then obviously progressed to that stage with Alzheimer's. So the other thing with an LPA and being an attorney is it doesn't mean that it's going to be something that's a short period of time. It can be, like my client, very significant length of time.
Yeah, I think the time for me was actually ultimately it ended in February of this year, when the donor passed away very suddenly. But what that meant was that because I had all the financial affairs sorted and organised, I was able to pass that information on to the solicitor, who was then sorting out the last will and testament and doing their executor duties in relation to that. Apparently, the solicitor said to me, most people hand their things in a plastic, a couple of plastic bags. Well, this was all itemised and organised. So I felt I did the donor proud there.
Well, again, this is the role of an end-of-life facilitator, isn't it? When we go in and we're helping people, it is about taking all those envelopes that have still got letters in from years ago, and taking disorganized systems and actually putting them into something where you can say, right, this is what we've got, this is what to do with it, and this is how we can help you and support you to make sure you have all your affairs in order. We're not lawyers, we're not legals, but it is just about collating, getting people to make the consideration, think about what they want, what they're doing, how it's going to affect their loved ones when they do die, and putting that in order. And that for us is a paid role. My feeling is with attorneys, again, I know I was my mom's attorney, it was different, she was family, you were an attorney for a friend, but this is not a paid role. This is something that you you're volunteering to do to help somebody else through that process. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Yes, it was. One can claim expenses, legitimate expenses with receipts and things like that. But it was an unpaid role. Yeah.
Which again, when specifically talking about my client, they've been doing that role for 9 years. They deal with the care home. They deal with all, if you like, any sort of medical, because they're also health and welfare. So there is a lot to do. They deal with a property. They deal with all pensions, finances, everything. And it can be a lot to do, can't it?
It can. And I think whether you're in the role for 9 months or 9 years, the responsibility is huge. And I don't want to underplay that for people, because I think knowing what you and I know, Dale, about the kind of detail end of life planning facilitation takes, and the charges that can be made for that. This is similar, but very, very different.
Yes, I completely agree with you. And I think this was the reason I wanted to have a conversation with you and actually say to people, yeah, it is what you need. You absolutely need to be looking at lasting power of attorneys, because as somebody who is potentially going to become a donor, you need to make sure you have somebody that you trust, somebody that can do it and is capable in themselves and has the ability to do it. And again, nobody knows actually how long that role will be. The flip side is you have to be willing to give that time, regardless of length, because once you're in, that can't, that you can actually sort of come off it if you really feel that you can't do it, but then somebody else still has to take that on. And it's very expensive if that goes to lawyers.
Yes, it's I can't emphasize enough the seriousness of the role, and the fact that it does or can take a lot of time. Interestingly, some people would see a lasting power of attorney as a bit of an insurance policy, a just in case situation, and hopefully, it never happens. And apparently, I heard only 10% of LPAs ever get activated.
Okay.
Yeah,
I didn't know that, which actually is quite a small number. Although, again, I suppose it depends on, for me, the person who's being given that role must ensure they know what they've got to do and are capable of it. Because do that role because you were trained in end-of-life facilitation, you're very organized in yourself, you understand figures, numbers, and have that level of ability to do that. You really do need to be very careful about agreeing to do a role, especially if you don't have that organizational and administrative skills. I mean, would you agree with that?
I totally agree with that. I think as well, the other key thing, if it's non-family, which mine was, is the kind of relationship that you build with the donor. Now, I'd known the donor for probably over 40 years, but in that time, I'd probably met them a handful of times. So we knew who we were with it, we'd met each other before. But I wasn't a stranger, but I was certainly very much removed from their life. And similarly then with my life, and physically we live quite a way apart as well. So there is that relationship and the ability to have open and frank conversations, particularly in my case around the property and financial affairs. Building that trust with the donor is vital.
You need to think quite seriously about who is able to do it, who has the time to do it, and who is going to do the best by you when doing it. But if you're being asked to be somebody's attorney, you equally need to think about your life, your time, your ability to commit and do a good job for that person.
Yeah, and I think it's being self-evaluative about oneself. Have I got the skills to do it? Like you were mentioning before. I was totally confident I had the skills to do it. But it was you just can't imagine what because you're living through somebody else's life, if you will, and dealing with things for them, and not necessarily always anticipating, because you're not there, about what will happen and when.
Okay. Have you learned a lot from it? Because I found with things to do with my mum, I wouldn't want to be put back in that situation again, obviously, and I didn't want to be in that situation in the first place. But I learned so much from it. Really, it's why I'm sat here talking to you, because I felt that other people needed to learn from the experiences that we were going through.
I probably knew about the process, but I think if anything, I learned more about myself from that, from taking on that responsibility and moving things through during the process. I've learned things about myself that I perhaps hadn't realised before.
If a family member was to ask you to do it after your experience with this, regardless of this being a family member or not, would you take it on?
But for a family member, I would, most certainly, yes. Yeah, I mean, we're quite close-knit in our family, and I certainly would take it on for my sisters, most certainly.
Do you think that also is because of your relationship with them and your knowledge of what they would want and how you would be doing it to sort of the best for you and the best for them?
Yes, I think it is different with family because you know them in depth for many, many, many years, lots of contact with them, and also what their hopes and fears are, and we're the kind of family that have those kind of discussions.
The discussions are the most important element, aren't they?
Absolutely key to have that, conversation ongoing, checking back. Are you happy with this? I'm going to do this. What do you think about? And those kind of, it's because in my case, the person was still able to know and understand the kind of things we were talking about. They just weren't able to do it for themselves. So there was almost that still that intellectual understanding of the processes that I was talking to them about, and then taking their wishes and putting those in place.
Yeah. Well, is there anything that you would sort of say to anybody watching this with regards to being an attorney on an LPA? Is there any advice or thought that you would want to give before we finish?
I think I would just add, it's a privilege and almost an honor to do that for somebody, but don't underestimate the amount of responsibility that you're undertaking, and don't underestimate the amount of time it can take.
Thank you very much for your time, Claire. Really appreciated. It's good to get the other side and give it a little bit of perspective.
No problem. Good to talk with you, Dale, as always.